All right, we are live with today's live. Just gonna give it a couple minutes. All right, so today I wanted to work in some actual exercises. I've been doing a lot of talk, a lot of theory, answering a lot of questions about motivation, nutrition, discipline. Yeah, we just got to get into some movement patterns. Um, right off the bat, we talk about the importance of a warm up, the importance of mobility. I'm going to do some stuff that you guys don't need a gym for. And I'm going to wait till some people trickle in here to get more in depth in what we're going to be doing today. But yeah, I have the 5 codes for the 100 entries per code. So 500 entries total into the Peloton giveaway. So thanks for showing up. And good morning, Richard. Welcome. But yeah, the first thing I did, I just wanted to show you guys just a light mobility warm up. So typically when we're getting warmed up, we got to think kind of the forces of our body here. So we're very anteriorly engaged people. We're very forward moving people. We sit, we grab, we reach, we type in a computer. So this area in the front usually is really tight. So yeah, you can do back bend, sure. You can really prove that you can get to this end range of mobility. But really, what helps is actually to like overly contract this interior chain so that we can get the posterior to have the mobility that we need. So I like to start with just a dead hang. Right, your toes here, your knees are locked out. You can reach for grabbing underneath your toes here. And then what you can start to do is keeping those hips stable. You start to turn. Bring one shoulder down and stack the other one above it. You'll feel your QLs releasing and your lower back erectors releasing, which is usually what's compensating because we have weak glute and weak core. And that's what you'll start to see is all warm-ups are typically around the glutes and the core because those are the areas that people need the most. And they kind of go hand in hand. When I can warm up and strengthen my glutes, I'm going to be able to keep my core engaged because I'm keeping proper position with my pelvis and my hips. And that allows for the abdominal cylinder to be engaged. A lot of people think that your core maybe just be the abs right in front here, but it's this whole cylinder. And usually what people have trouble engaging is these obliques because so much tightness back here. So you're bending down, you're going side to side, and then the next part is just like a little um, yoga movement where we start to come up, bring those shoulders back to a flat back. So down again, we're activating that posterior chain. And then from here, we come all the way up, grab a wrist, tilt to the side, other wrist, tilt to the side, cactus your arms back, and then up and out, reaching as far as you can. And that's just a simple good morning stretch, stolen from yoga a little bit there. Another one that hits kind of all your bases is the world's greatest stretch. So um, you can start reaching for your toes, then walk your hands out, bring a foot next to your hand, and what you're doing here is you're opening up this hip. You're driving this knee out to the side, you're rolling to the outside of this foot, trying to open up your hip here or your adductors so you can get more mobility out of your pelvis and your hips. A lot of times, um, we have a mobile joint stacked by a stable joint and up the chain like that. So my ankle is very mobile, my knee is very stable, my hip needs to be very mobile. And when those offset, that's when we get compensation. That's when we get mobility in places that we need stability, and we get like the knee, and we have stability in places where we need mobility, like the hips. So we have to kind of like trade those, almost like the Indiana Jones swap. We need to get mobility from here while remaining stability over here. So you really want to open up those hips, then you want to rotate, and then you can switch sides, and then you can walk your hands back to your feet. And now that's going to get a lot of things in that deep lunge position. We're really starting to disengage our hip flexors and our quads so that we can hinge properly or extend properly through the glute and the hamstring using the quad versus using those hip flexors. Because your body is kind of like a battery. when we send power to a certain area, it's going to like innervate to all the cells that are engaged in that area. So I really need to the mobility portion of our warm up is like inhibition. I'm like turning off things that are overly engaged or overworked, or are doing more of the job than they should. Because the idea is that you want all the smaller muscles to be working the way they should, so the larger muscles can do the bulk of the work. But with that being said, I feel like we got pretty much everyone in here we're going to get today. And as I promised, 500 entries for joining this live. You can go to tinyurl.com/TFL giveaway to redeem these codes and the bonus entries at the bottom there. But the first one is just squat, SQUAT. So that's 100 points right there. And I'll be dishing more out as we go. The reason that we're talking about all this stuff again is just kind of constructing your best workouts. Now, a lot of the things that I'm seeing in the surveys are most people are either looking for weight loss or most people are looking for performance increases, which I think is wonderful because performance I think goes hand in hand with strength and longevity as well. Like it's not going to do your athlete any good to get them to perform amazingly if they're going to break down their fibers and feel like shit a day later. You're always thinking like the longevity of your athlete as well. But so my point here is for weight loss, there's really no, like the best exercise literally for weight loss is a caloric deficit. Bottom line, there's no specific exercise that's going to skyrocket your weight loss. And there's nothing that's going to override the benefits of just a sustainable caloric deficit. So that being said, sustainable meaning like 200 to 300 calories less than what your body burns on a daily basis. Most people's metabolic rate is somewhere between 1,300 and 1,800, and that's called your basal metabolic rate. That's how many calories you burn just being alive every day. Just if you laid in bed all day and blinked and breathed, these are how many calories you burn. So you want to be like 100 to 300 less than that. That'll make it sustainable, and that makes it so you're still eating and fueling that metabolism because your metabolism needs fuel to fire. But again, there's too much focus on the workout or the movement side of thing, and not enough on the nutrition side when it comes to weight loss. Now that will help you lose all that fat, but when it comes to then toning the muscle, then sure you want to add resistance training, but when it comes to calorie burning in the exercise side, you want to pick taxing movements. And now this is going to be true for performance increases. You want to pick things that are taxing on the system that the brain has to perceive, oh my gosh, we are overload here, we are uncomfortable, but it's like a little uncomfortable so that your body can expand and grow and create adaptations or a training effect. Because sometimes what happens is we add too much stress onto the system and the body's just surviving, just making it through that workout. You're not actually going to gain a training effect from it. You can actually decondition your system and perform worse at that next workout. So big movements being your squat, being your deadlift, being your overhead press, being your cleans. They're the staples of this industry, and they're the staples of the human body. When I think of a squat, really all I'm doing is sitting down, and my knees are coming forward, my ankles are flexing, and my hips are flexing. So they're all coming together. They're collapsing together and they're coming together, almost like a Jacob's ladder. And the next pattern would be when I just hinge. It's just knees and hips. Okay, very little ankle flexion there. And then obviously an overhead press or an overhead pull. Pull-up is a great exercise as well. But usually we have to start with people on the squat or the deadlift because they are the biggest area of opportunity for people to gain from these lifts to improve their performance because everything's working together again. So there's a time and a place for isolation work, but unless you're a bodybuilder, you don't want to stay in isolation work because you're trying to teach everything to, again, fire together, work together. That's functional training. So my first stage of my squat, I'll start people on the ground, and I just want them to do a glute bridge, a single leg glute bridge. So they have their knee to their chest, they're inhibiting their hip flexor with this opposite leg, and they're activating that glute on that other side. And then from there, you can go into a half kneeling position, and you're doing a glute contraction, glute pulse contraction, because again, I'm training my body to eventually do something in standing. We talk about stages of development. We go from the ground, we roll over on all fours, we go to half kneeling, and then we're standing. Think of like a baby developing these skills. So same thing for our body. When we're trying to program our brain to perform things correctly, we're trying to perform for better instincts. We're trying to train in the gym in a way that's going to improve our performance outside the gym, right? So I'm going to try to train better instincts and drill this into my system so that it's in my DNA and it's just reflexive. So that when I go into a squat, my hips don't take all that tension and hurt my lower back. So that my glutes and hamstrings load that tension, and I'm in a nice upright position with my torso and my head, so I stay over my center of mass, and I'm very efficient with my force production. So half kneeling position, then we go to standing, and then the first thing really is isolation. Little fact here was the first time they incorporated isometric strength exercises into strength conditioning settings were the Green Bay Packers in the 80s. And that same year, they won the championship. So being able to control my positioning and own this positioning at the bottom and breathe in this positioning at the bottom with everything properly under tension, my glutes, my core, my head's in good position, I don't feel any joint pain. Being able to own that bottom position will create a nice launch pad. So when we have weight on us, we'll be able to fire like a rocket from that bottom position. Just so I can catch my breath here. The next code for 100 entries is deadlift. People are probably trying different exercises now, but I'm not making it that easy. I just picked my favorites. So squat and deadlift are the first two codes to get your 100 entries. So moving forward, the whole purpose of being able to improve this movement pattern, this technique, is to eventually overload it. I'm not going to create adaptations until I can safely overload my system, and with an emphasis on safely. I think too many times I see people who are looking for those performance gains kind of willing to rob Paul to pay Peter, willing to deal with that ankle pain or knee pain or hip pain in order to go heavier. And that's not the way you want to do things. You always want to train things with proper technique. With technique will come progress. So where I want people to take things in a squat is being able to hold a weight in front at your chest here and being able to do 10 reps here of a goblet squat. Be able to work up to about 35, 40 pounds in this setting before you put the barbell on. And then, fascinating thing with the barbell, something that's such a staple in this industry, is I can keep it over my center of mass. That's why I'm saying with the goblet squat, you don't need to work up to like a 100-pound goblet squat, because this is just going to become an arm workout at some point, holding it in front like that. But with the barbell, I actually keep it over my center line, my center of mass, and my midfoot. What that allows for me to do is put on a lot of weight. So again, overloading my system in a safe manner. I'm not doing this in front of me. I'm doing it right over my center of mass, so I have the ability to properly maintain technique. As long as I can do it with my body weight, I can do it properly with the bar. Don't think, oh, I can't do it without the bar. I can't squat properly without the bar. Wrong mentality. You've got to be able to do this stuff with your body weight, then a dumbbell or a kettlebell, and then you can add the bar. That's how we safely progress things. So we're doing things with proper technique, and with technique will come progress. So again, the fact that I'm able to maintain this position over my center of mass in the squat allows me to be strong, and it allows me to add weight to it, allows me to improve this movement pattern, which is so primal to the human body, collapsing all the joints together and standing up. Now, you'll start to notice if you tip forward, because you don't have good thoracic extension, then you're going to start to leverage yourself out of these squats. And it's going to feel like a good morning with that forming a lot of tension on your lower back. So you'll start to be able to correct yourself by how difficult it gets. And that's the purpose of going up in weight in a undulated pattern. So I'll get to that in a second. We'll talk about programming here in a second, but I think that kind of covers everything that I want to talk about with the squat. Another piece that I will add in a little bit later is what do you do if you have an imbalance? What if you notice that you're driving more of that right leg, or you have what's called a functional scoliosis? You come down, you kind of torque to one side. It's your brain kind of naturally perceiving the weight in a way that it needs to avoid pain. So or an injury. So that's where it's important to address some of these lingering injuries that have happened maybe even since we were in high school. Is like if I have a little stiffness in my left knee, if I go down to a squat, my body might shift to the right. It's going to protect you. It's going to try to compensate so you're not going to get hurt. But number one predictor of injury is previous injury. Number two predictor of injury is a muscle imbalance. What's also fascinating is we kind of come pre-caked with some asymmetries in our body. We have 3 lobes of our lung on the right side. We only have 2 lobes of our lung on the left. Our diaphragm is larger on the right side than it is the left. What does this mean? This means, well, we needed room for the heart, which is actually more in the center than all the way on the left, but I didn't build us, okay? I'm just telling you about us. But what this means is there's a reason why the data would show we are more anatomically driven through that right side of strength and performance, and the left side it's a lot harder for people. And what's fascinating is like when it comes to these movement patterns and we start to add weight on the system, we start to see where the form breaks down. And 9 out of 10 times if people have a problem with a right or left side, it's a problem with their left side. They'll feel their left hip or their SI joint kind of up here off to the side above their hip there, or they'll feel tightness in their left hip flexor. But it comes down to them not engaging through their left oblique and their left hamstring correctly. So it's amazing. I rarely ever see someone can't engage that right oblique or that right hamstring properly, unless they've had like surgery and like a really serious traumatic injury to that side. It's almost always that left side because again, the natural asymmetries in the body. So keeping that in mind, activating your left oblique in like a left side plank, turning on your left hamstring in like a single leg RDL setting can really go a long way to translating over to a strong squat. But back to one of the points I made earlier about isolation work is it's an okay place to revert back to, but you don't want to stay there unless you're a professional bodybuilder, because the purpose of an isolation work is to then be the piece in the bigger compound movement that allows for proper functioning and mobility and strength and firing. So basically you can do things like if you're having trouble with the squat, you can do things like a split squat where it's one foot in front of the other and you're working on just staying upright. A lot of times you may feel yourself being flexed forward over that knee, and that can be because we're quad dominant. We talked about a little bit in the beginning about being anteriorly engaged because we're very forward moving people. When we're quad dominant, we'll feel a lot of tension in the quads. We'll almost feel most of our weight's probably going to be in the ball of our foot rather than in the whole foot or the heel. And it can lead to knee pain because that quad muscle actually goes and wraps over the kneecap. So if I'm even if I'm like 60% quad, 40% hamstring, I'm gonna eventually feel that torque and that tension on that joint, maybe even some shearing at that joint, which is gonna lead to long-term pain or damage, which we don't want. The other one I really like here, that I think is one of the best to improve your squat movement. I mean, also too, like you can use a TRX strap or like a post, and you can just work on getting that good range of motion. And that can be a good way to start, almost taking weight off the system to learn how to control a portion of the body weight before it goes and controls the rest of the body weight. But my favorite, hands down, accessory work for the squat is the front foot elevated squat. So you want probably like 6 to 12 inches with this foot up, and not only are you coming forward, you're coming down. I'm keeping my foot flat, keeping that heel down, driving that knee as far over the toe as I can, and then going down so that I can feel my hamstring and my glute. A lot of the times, again, people are feeling the quad, but that heel will come up, and they're not actually getting good engagement out of that hamstring and glute. We're not teaching the joints to collapse and keep all muscles under tension. We're isolating. We're like doing a really poor movement pattern. So again, foot flat, heel stays down, knee goes far over toe as possible, and we come down as low as we can. And from here, you should really feel that first thing that's firing out of position is that glute muscle. Contract that glute muscle to bring you up and out of that position. So great squat accessory exercise to then improve your squat in general. So, catch my breath here. The third entry code for 100 more entries is POWER, P-O-W-E-R, because it's probably the most important. Little rant here, but you see power lifters, they just lift as heavy as they can in a squat, lift as heavy as they can in a deadlift. And it at a certain point, they're going a little bit slower. And the fascinating thing is Olympic lifting should really be called powerlifting because they're actually producing the most amount of power through that exercise. That's what you're trying to do with the muscle, is you're trying to use that elasticity of the muscle to produce as much power as possible. With some of the professional athletes or even D1 level athletes, they'll have squat racks in the gym, and all they're trying to do with the squat rack is measure power output. They have these like little machine units on the side that are kind of measuring the distance, calculating how much power production they're creating, and then they just figure out what weight to add on there in order to find their most power producing load, essentially. And it's never 100%. You're never at a 1 rep max for most power production. It just doesn't work that way. So power is the most important thing. In the force equals ma equation, mass is a linear relationship to force, but acceleration, speed is an inverse relation or exponential relationship, excuse me. So that when you can add speed to something and improve your speed of something, you're going to exponentially increase the force production in that exercise. Let's see, I got a question here. How about posture during the squat? So yeah, let's go back to that really quick. Posture, I'm not exactly sure if you want to explain a little bit more specifically what your question is, but I think what you're referring to is overall how your body sits. And so if you notice, my knees kind of bow out a little bit. They're going out over like my third toe, and my chest is up, my head is forward because my head is an extension of my spine. And I think in terms of posture, it's about, think about your shin and your spine wanting to be parallel. So most of the time people squat like this. You can already see my shin is vertical and my spine is more horizontal. I'm putting a lot of tension on my knees and my lower back in this position. And now the opposite would be true is if I have so much flexion out of my knees and I was just upright in my torso, this is going to put probably a lot of tension on my quads and my knees again. And you're not going to see lifters get like that. So proper posture is just about, again, maintaining your positioning, because you're going to be stronger if you can maintain that positioning throughout the whole lift. Now, and again, that's why the first place to start with people, if this is the first time doing a barbell squat and you're throwing weight on yourself, I want you to work on breathing. I want you to work on keeping your glutes under tension in a nice, slow, and controlled manner, coming down. And I want you to hold this position for 3 breaths before squeezing your glutes and firing up. Because again, that's going to improve, because posture is a very static thing. So we need to improve our positioning in a functional type of manner. I need to be able to improve the way that my hips go back, my knees go forward, my ankles are flexing, and they're all working together so that I can maintain my center line over my midfoot. So by the time I get to the bottom, I'll be able to just get that stretch reflex of the muscle. Because you're starting with your glutes engaged and you're going down, they're expanding, and then boom, stretch reflex. And even that's how the tempo of proper lifting comes into play. So I need a little bit of weight on this. So we talked about proper positioning. Well, let's talk about kind of proper cadence for the way that you should be performing this lift. Is again, priority 1, isolation, pause work at the bottom, strong platform. Once we have a strong platform, then we're ready to become that rocket ship. So what you want to do is you're squeezing your glutes in this position, you're starting your knees to come down, you're like priming your hamstrings and your glutes for that springiness, and then from here, you're actually going to kind of pick up speed. So it's like slow and then boom, and bounce out of that position. Again, stretch reflex the muscles. So I'll go again. And this time you're going to hear me breathe, because I want to emphasize the importance of when that exhale happens. So breath in to start, hold everything tight, and then I'll go, and you'll hear my exhale as I launch from the bottom. Because the pocket or the hole at the bottom of the squat is where most people are going to get stuck. We want to maintain, not only make sure we're doing a proper pattern and positioning, but we want to maintain tension through that. So again, we're bouncing through that end range motion. We're creating the most power out of that muscle. We're keeping that elasticity of the muscle, and then I'm making sure I exhale as I come up, as I'm exerting myself, because that's like the exhaust pipe. If I put a potato in my exhaust pipe in my car, it's not going to run anymore. Not because it's not getting any more fuel in, because it's not getting the waste out. So we need to make sure we're getting waste out, cycling air through, and that's the proper cadence for a squat. I'll demonstrate it one more time, and then I'll give you guys another entry code. Patiently waiting over there. So breath in, hold it, hold your glutes are engaged, you're pushing those knees forward first. And if the weight isn't so heavy yet, then you don't need to necessarily take a breath every single rep. You know, I'm exaggerating the breathing. You do want to kind of exhale effortlessly. You don't want to be exerting so much energy and wasting so much ATP just to exhale. That should come more effortlessly. But yeah, that's the squat in a nutshell. So, like I said, another entry code is mobility, mobility. And now again, you can, just a friendly reminder, you can go to the contest page. That's tinyurl.com/TFL giveaway. And then at the very bottom is the bonus entry code section where you can redeem these points. Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun today. I'm surprised that it's already we're already 30 minutes into this. I haven't even gotten to the deadlift or the overhead press. I feel bad, like I'm just rambling on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and um, talk about one other thing that I wanted to mention, and then we'll save some of the bigger lifts for next live, and get you guys out of here and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So the big thing I wanted to mention, obviously, I wanted to get into the most important lifts and just kind of teach you guys how to do those properly, because no matter what you're doing, that's going to equate to performance. There might be some more specifics that you would change and add to improve your performance in a specific exercise or modality, whatever your competition is. But the muscle fibers need to be strong, even in like an endurance setting. Um, and then again, it just depends on how your training is. Maybe it's more isolation, maybe it's more concentric, maybe it's no eccentric work, maybe it's all eccentric work. Those specifics start to change a little bit depending on the individual athlete and their performance output and their current status. But there's nothing that's going to equate to the squat, the deadlift, and the clean in terms of strength and power. When done the right way, is going to improve your performance of those muscle fibers, improve your longevity, because it's going to keep everything strong and tight and in good posture, and not get things out of position, which then leads to injury. Remember, number one predictor of injury is previous injury. Number two predictor of injury is imbalances in our system. But yeah, so like I said, squat, deadlift, overhead press, most important, and cleans. But when it comes to figuring out how to do those properly, sometimes we again have to go to that isolation side of things so that we can then do things bilaterally with proper firing and proper technique. So I showed you guys that front foot elevated squat. That's my favorite one for improving the way we can squat on both legs. You can also do something like just a eccentric step up. So a lot of times we talk about how the hamstring is having problems engaging in the squat. So what you do is you come up, the concentric part of the step up is coming up, but then what you do is you slowly control yourself coming down. So you have to force that hamstring to absorb that tension. And again, it's in much more of a squat setting, which just because you have that knee bending happening, you're forcing that knee to move forward, but keep the posterior muscles engaged, and then that'll help translate over to the squat. So two great accessory exercises to improve the way that you can squat. And then the way we hinge, that's back to the single leg glute bridge on the ground. That was a hinge pattern. But another way to improve that is just our single leg RDL, holding two dumbbells, one in each hand. And now the key with this exercise is to not do this, to not round your lower back thinking, oh, I just need to get to my toe. Because you're not hinging, you're not using your glute, you're not using your hamstring, and you're adding to more bad movement patterns. So what you can start, and hinging is like the hardest thing for people. We don't see our glutes, we see our chest, we know what we're doing in our chest, we can see the front of our body, we can see when we're squatting. Hinging is so hard for people to get down if they've never done it before. But the quickest way to teach people in like 10 seconds is put their hands on their hips and make a hand sandwich between your thighs and your belly. And all you're doing is pushing those hips back as you bow forward. And then you become the dodo bird, whereas that leg tips back, your nose tips forward. Think about the back of your head and your heel. There's like a cable between them or a wire between them. And as one moves, the other one has to move also. And that's going to allow you to have control in this position so you can be fancy and show off on your Facebook Live. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, that's accessory for the deadlift. Probably the only other one that I'd recommend if you're having deadlift problems is taking a bench. I'll use this box right now. I'll hurt my back for you guys, just for demonstration purposes. And then so you have your shoulder blades along the bench, and you're doing a single leg glute bridge. You have your head forward, your butt touches the ground, and then you're driving the hip up. And then you can put a weight on this side, and you can improve your glute hamstring firing and your hinge pattern. That'll again equate over to the deadlift. Last thing, and then I'll leave you with the final bonus code, is ability to press and pull. We talk a lot about lower body because it is the foundation. We got to build this, it's like a pyramid. We got to build a nice, strong foundation. Legs, so important. So, since we talk about legs all day today, I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite accessory exercises for the upper body, which is just a half kneeling overhead press. And what I'm doing is I'm engaging my glutes. My trunk is nice and stable because I'm of this half kneeling position. And my shoulder, look how far back that is. My elbow is so tight that I'm focusing on the scapula. Sometimes people are too much in front or they don't come down enough and they're here because they're absorbing it into the shoulder and the rotator cuff and they're pressing from that rotator cuff, that anterior delt, and they're not getting enough in the posterior. Well, for my squat, remember we talked about your glutes? That's kind of like the foundation of our core. That's what it sits on top of. Well, for my pressing, this foundation, this is pressing off of my rib cage. My scapula back here attaches to my rib cage. My rib cage is that platform I'm pressing from and that I need to return to. You should feel a lot more lat. You should feel that posterior scap. And you're almost back here, almost kind of arching a little bit because again, you're getting that S in your spine and you're pressing from here, head up, head's an extension of your spine. Don't flex your neck forward. You're just adding to bad movement pattern. Always think of proper posture and everything that we're doing. That'll translate over to then me pressing overhead standing or me doing a proper pull-up. So that's my favorite overhead accessory exercise. Probably the other one I throw in is called a scap pull-up, where all you're doing is hanging from a bar and then you're working on pulling your shoulders down. So shoulders are near your ears, shoulder blades are in your rib cage. Shoulders are near your ears, shoulder blades are in your rib cage. And once you can do that, then you can start doing pull-ups and maintain proper position, and it'll actually keep the work done where you want it to be versus adding to compensations, adding to bad movement patterns, adding to pain later down the line, or just bad firing in whatever you're trying to perform. So yeah, that covers pretty much everything I wanted to go over today, from basically teaching the basics of exercise, the fundamentals of a squat, proper positioning, proper technique. We didn't get into any programming today, but I will leave you with your final entry code for today is lift 4. So LIFT and then the number 4. I'm going to catch my breath now and I'll open up the floor for any questions that anyone has. I'll be here for the next couple minutes. But thank you for those watching. Thanks for tuning in. And just stay tuned. We're going to be doing these lives every week and hope you guys got something out of it. If not, feel free to message me and I can work on some of the specifics that people are experiencing. I love diving into the specifics. Obviously, I have to keep these lives a little bit general, but it's always better with a specific case study, specific set of parameters, rather than just speaking to an empty void. But I'll go ahead and be quiet now. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, I'm always open. Nothing today. Well, thanks again for tuning in. This was Matt Gluckman with Think Fitness Life doing our Peloton giveaway. Um, and we're going to be actually finalizing this competition and starting a new competition. I think we are getting some information from some of our audience. I think people are gearing more towards wanting like home gym equipment. So I think the next contest we're going to do is for a home gym. Yeah, Richard, that's a great term. Gluteal amnesia. That's exactly what happens. We get gluteal and core amnesia, and I'm glad that you found the hinge pelvic stuff a big help because that it is so critical. Like it's so funny. It's this small muscle that we don't ever pay attention to, unless you were someone who had to give birth. Then they teach you pelvic floor exercises. They don't want you to get diastasis recti, expanding that abdomen, but I had SI pain myself. I had to go to a physical therapist, and the first thing he did, it almost felt like a little meditation thing. He had me lie on the ground, and for 2 minutes, he just had me breathe, close my eyes, and do pelvic tilts till he was instructing me like use as little energy as possible to do this pelvic tilt because again, you're trying to reprogram your DNA to incorporate it. So you're trying to do it in such a slow, easy setting so that it comes natural. So a pelvic tilt is just a little bit of arch in your back, and then you're just tilting your hips until you can feel your glutes. And you start to realize, wow, I don't need as much energy as I was using before just to get there. Um, and again, just about stages of development, reprogramming the DNA and our body for better instincts. But all right, I can talk about this stuff all day long. So I have to wait till next week. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.